In a stunning and alarming development, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko has reportedly taken a decisive step that could reshape the geopolitical balance of Europe. According to multiple international sources, Lukashenko has now moved from being a cautious ally of Moscow to a fully active participant in Vladimir Putin's war against Ukraine. This marks a new and dangerous phase in the conflict, one that could expand far beyond the borders of Ukraine, threatening the security and stability of the entire European continent. For years, Lukashenko managed to maintain a delicate balance between Russia and the West. While heavily reliant on Moscow for political and economic support, he often avoided full-scale involvement in Russian military operations. However, recent intelligence and satellite data suggest that Belarus is now directly supporting Russia's offensive with logistical, intelligence, and possibly even combat forces. This shift has sparked major concern among NATO allies, particularly those bordering Belarus such as Poland, Lithuania, and Latvia. The turning point appears to have come after a series of closed-door meetings between Lukashenko and Putin in Moscow and Sochi. Reports indicate that Putin pressured Lukashenko to open Belarusian territory for new hybrid military operations, combining conventional forces, cyberattacks, and information warfare. The Kremlin's goal is clear: to stretch Ukraine's defenses thin and to threaten NATO's eastern flank. Belarus has already allowed Russia to deploy short-range ballistic missiles, including Iskander systems, near its southern border. Russian aircraft, drones, and troops have also been observed operating from Belarusian bases. But now, according to Ukrainian intelligence, Belarusian special units have begun conducting cross-border raids, sabotage missions, and reconnaissance operations inside northern Ukraine. This marks a dramatic escalation. What was once a safe rear zone for Kyiv could soon become a new front line. Ukrainian defense officials warn that Belarus could serve as a staging ground for a renewed northern offensive, potentially targeting Kyiv again, as in the early days of Russia's 2022 invasion. A new hybrid war, however. Lukashenko's strategy appears to go beyond traditional warfare. Analysts describe his approach as a hybrid campaign aimed at destabilizing Europe on multiple fronts simultaneously. Firstly, Belarus has been accused of orchestrating migrant pressure tactics on the European Union's borders. Thousands of refugees, mostly from the Middle East and Africa, have been flown into Belarus and pushed toward Poland and Lithuania, overwhelming border controls. European officials say this is not a humanitarian crisis by accident. It is a deliberate operation designed to create political chaos within the EU. Secondly, cyber attacks originating from Belarusian servers have spiked in recent weeks, targeting infrastructure, government institutions, and media outlets in Poland and the Baltic states. Experts believe these attacks are coordinated with Russia's cyber units, forming part of a larger campaign to undermine European security and test NATO's response capabilities. Thirdly, Lukashenko's regime continues to spread disinformation on social media, amplifying anti-Western narratives and pro-Kremlin propaganda. By doing so, Belarus has become an active participant in the information war that seeks to divide European societies, weaken support for Ukraine, and sow distrust among NATO members. Motives behind Lukashenko's move. Why has Lukashenko chosen this path now? There are several possible explanations. One is survival. Since the 2020 Belarusian protests and subsequent Western sanctions, Lukashenko has been isolated internationally. His brutal crackdown on opposition figures and journalists has turned him into a pariah in the West. Russia, on the other hand, has been his only lifeline, providing loans, energy subsidies, and security guarantees. In return, Putin has demanded loyalty and deeper military integration. By joining the war effort, Lukashenko might believe he is securing his political survival under Moscow's protection. Yet this move also ties his fate completely to Putin's. If Russia loses the war, Lukashenko risks being swept away by domestic unrest or by a Kremlin-backed replacement who would be even more obedient to Moscow. Another motive is leverage. By actively participating in Russia's campaign, Lukashenko may hope to gain more bargaining power within the so-called Union State of Russia and Belarus. He could demand more economic aid, military support, and even political concessions from Putin in exchange for his cooperation. But historically, such leverage has been one-sided. Putin gives little and demands everything. European reaction: the European Union and NATO have responded with sharp warnings. Polish President Andrzej Duda called Belarus's actions a direct threat to European security and announced the deployment of additional troops along Poland's eastern border. Lithuania and Latvia have done the same, reinforcing defensive positions and tightening border controls. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has stated that the alliance is closely monitoring Belarus's military movements and stands ready to defend every inch of Allied territory. NATO's intelligence command has increased surveillance flights over Belarus and the Suwalki Gap, the narrow land corridor connecting Poland and Lithuania, seen as a potential flashpoint if Russia and Belarus attempt to isolate the Baltic states. Meanwhile, European leaders have vowed to impose new sanctions on Minsk. These could include freezing assets, restricting trade, and targeting Belarusian officials involved in military cooperation with Russia. Brussels is also considering cutting off Belarus from certain European financial systems to limit its ability to fund military operations. Ukraine's response for Ukraine. Belarus's new involvement represents a nightmare scenario. Kyiv's armed forces are already stretched thin across multiple fronts, from the Donetsk region to the southern Kherson and Zaporizhia areas. A renewed northern threat would force Ukraine to divert critical resources away from the main battlefield. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has warned that any Belarusian troops crossing into Ukraine will face a strong and immediate response. "We will not allow another invasion from the north," he said. Ukrainian Defense Intelligence claims that Russia and Belarus are planning a coordinated false flag incident, possibly a staged attack on Belarusian territory, to justify direct Belarusian intervention. Kyiv has also appealed to Western allies for more air defense systems and reconnaissance drones to monitor the northern border. In recent weeks, several Shahad drones launched from Belarus have been intercepted over northern Ukraine, suggesting the airspace is already being used as a launch corridor for attacks. Internal pressure in Belarus. Inside Belarus, the situation is becoming increasingly volatile. Public opinion surveys, although limited due to government repression, indicate that a large portion of the Belarusian population opposes involvement in the war. Many Belarusians see the conflict as Putin's war, not theirs, and fear being dragged into a disaster that offers them nothing but hardship. Thousands of Belarusian volunteers have actually joined the Ukrainian army, forming the Kalinowski Regiment, which fights against Russian forces. These fighters have vowed to liberate both Ukraine and their own homeland from dictatorship. Their presence on the front lines is a symbol of internal resistance against Lukashenko's regime. At the same time, underground opposition networks in Belarus are reportedly sabotaging rail lines, communication systems, and fuel depots used for Russian logistics. Such acts of defiance show that Lukashenko's control, while brutal, is not absolute. The more he supports Putin's war, the more domestic instability he risks creating. The larger geopolitical picture, Lukashenko's entry into the war, cannot be viewed in isolation. It fits into Putin's broader strategy of building a new axis of confrontation with the West. Alongside Russia and Belarus, countries like Iran and North Korea have become key players in supplying weapons, drones, and ammunition. By aligning Belarus more tightly with Russia, Putin effectively expands his military reach into Central Europe. This gives Moscow new leverage over NATO's eastern flank and provides additional territory for troop movements, missile deployments, and intelligence operations. The ultimate goal could be to turn Belarus into a forward operating base, a permanent extension of the Russian military machine. From a European perspective, this development represents a hybrid threat of unprecedented complexity. It combines military aggression, cyber warfare, information manipulation, and migration crises. Unlike the clear-cut divisions of the Cold War, today's conflicts operate in a gray zone where traditional defense mechanisms struggle to respond. What comes next? The question now is, how far will Lukashenko go? Analysts outline several possible scenarios. In the first scenario, Belarus continues to serve mainly as a support base, providing logistics, intelligence, and limited hybrid operations without sending large conventional forces into Ukraine. This would allow Lukashenko to claim he is helping Russia while avoiding massive domestic backlash. In the second scenario, Belarus directly joins the war, sending thousands of troops across the border to open a new northern front. Such an action would almost certainly provoke a major international crisis and could trigger NATO to strengthen its eastern defenses dramatically. In the third and most dangerous scenario, Lukashenko could allow Russia to station nuclear weapons permanently on Belarusian soil. In fact, Putin already announced earlier deployments of tactical nuclear warheads in Belarus, claiming they are meant to balance Western threats. If confirmed, this would mark the first nuclear positioning outside Russia since the collapse of the Soviet Union and a direct challenge to the European security architecture. Conclusion: a new era of instability. Lukashenko's decision to join Putin's war marks a dark new chapter for Europe. What began as a regional conflict between Russia and Ukraine is now evolving into a multi-layered confrontation involving cyber warfare, propaganda, and hybrid military tactics that transcend borders. For Belarus, the consequences could be catastrophic. Economically isolated, politically repressed, and now militarily entangled, the country risks becoming a mere satellite of Moscow, losing what little sovereignty it still has. For Europe, the challenge is to deter further aggression while avoiding a direct escalation that could spiral into a continent-wide war. As of now, the situation remains fluid. Western intelligence agencies are tracking Belarus's movements closely, and diplomatic channels are working overtime to prevent the worst outcomes. But one thing is certain: by aligning himself so openly with Putin, Lukashenko has crossed a line that may prove impossible to retreat from. History will judge whether this was a calculated move of survival or a fatal mistake that drags his nation into ruin. The coming months will determine not just the fate of Belarus, but the future of security in Europe itself.